Monday, July 1st, and welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams around our league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry to be present at all times. He's NL Dan, I'm AL Warren, and Dan, and I'm getting mad. Okay, I want trades. It's July, where's my trades? How come the floodgates are opening? And who, Dan, might be the first domino to fall? Where would they go? That's a loaded question. But if you had to speculate, buddy, what's going on? And what's going to happen first?
Yeah, Warren, it's tough because you're right. At this point, I would have expected that we would have seen something happen by now. And it makes me think that maybe there are a couple teams that are holding all of the cards. Teams maybe like the White Sox, for example, Warren. They got guys like the Garrett Crochet on one side of the ball, and they got Luis Robert Jr. on the other, and other guys like Tommy Pham. So multiple pieces that maybe they're shopping amongst multiple different teams, and maybe they have their offers and they're just sitting on them, trying to get the best one they can. At this point, that's my best guess about what's taking so long. I mean, if you want to be particular about it, Warren, we've had a couple trades this year already. Maybe some of the trades earlier in the year have kind of made people a little bit more nervous as we get towards the deadline. And honestly, I think the main thing is that price tags sound like they're just really high. So the closer we get to the deadline, the more the sense of urgency increases, and hopefully the more we see GMs get an itchy trigger finger and pull the trigger and actually get a deal going. Because as soon as that first deal goes, Warren, I think the floodgates will open and we'll see a whole bunch more coming in quick.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised some of these teams don't feel rushed. We've talked about how Atlanta needs to get going and Philadelphia too, depending on how long some of these injuries are going. If they're going to get some of those consistent hard-hitting outfielders we keep on harping on, then you got to get going and get it going quick. Questions are starting to abound about some of these teams. I mean, we've seen some hot streaks in the last couple of weeks that have teams like the Mets. This week, the Angels. Stay tuned for that. I mean, there's some interesting runs happening, and now teams are looking at each other like, I don't know, we might actually be okay. It's going to be very interesting to see who truly does buy, who truly does sell. And we're just chomping at the bit for it. But not quite as much as we're chomping at the bit to cover another 10 or so games that each team has gone through in this week's anti-rankings. Dan, there's a lot of very interesting movements up and down this week. Some of our best teams took slumps. Some of our slumps fed up. So it's going to be a fun show as we try to breakneck our way. Sorry, I'm breaking the neck of my microphone here. Breakneck our way through this specific iteration of the anti-rankings. It's July, so it's about time we know where all these teams stand. Let's hope. Let's see how many patterns get broken this week, buddy. Now, normally the pattern is that the team with the better record between Dan's Mets and my Mariners picks the first team to take off the board. And with no black hole teams, no perfect teams, platinum teams, whatever have you, everybody's somewhere in that middle. And it's just who won more, who lost more, etc. Dan, you won more. Your New York Mets had a great week. And you were number one in our rankings last week. Will you repeat? We're just going to have to see how we improvise the list, but you do get to pick first. What's number 30 in the anti-rankings as we take off?
Thank you, Warren. It's pretty tough this week. As you mentioned, we have a lot of teams up, a lot of teams down. Kind of surprising to see what we've already seen so far. So it's pretty tough. If we're looking at the bottom of what our expectations, right? I'm looking at, said this a few times, right, Warren? You know where I'm coming from. I'm looking at strength of schedule. I'm looking at expectations from the individual teams and just what do we expect? So there are teams that had somewhat worse weeks. But for me, Warren, the very bottom this week is going to have to be the Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, looking at the records, I was thinking that was going to stand out like a sore thumb. Good shot well taken. they were the worst. They went 3-7 this week, everybody. And if you need me to break down how, first, losing 2 against the Mets out of 3, losing 3 against the Giants out of 4, big hit there. Maybe the biggest in my estimation. And then, I mean, literally, it was 4 games, guys. Anyway, Milwaukee also took 2 of 3 from them. I'm bummed. I am bummed to see Chicago floundering because, of course, I picked this team to win the National League Central, and we keep teasing they might get better as soon as our last conversation on YouTube. So, what do you think, dude? Are they going to get better? What's happening? Any ideas?
So the offense is completely drying up, dude. I mean, it's getting to a point where there's a lot of teams this week. Every team they faced, and the Mets and the Giants and Milwaukee, teams in the National League that they're gonna see in this wild card race going the rest of the way, and they lost every single series, dude. The offense has been non-existent. Also worth noting that Shoto Imanaga had his second start against the Mets. It was his first time facing the same team for his second start, and he got blown up multiple home runs in less than 4 innings. It could be an unnerving trend for Imanaga going forward, and he was one of the few bright spots. So the only thing really positive to look on from this past week, Kyle Hendricks, Warren, he's back.
Yeah.
He introduced a curveball that he's increased his usage of, and he's got a 1.27 ERA in June, and that's really the only bright spot for the Cubs so far. They might have to get aggressive at the deadline and if they still want to make a run for it.
Excellent idea. Now, would you go pitching or would you go offense? I'd have to go offense personally. It just seems
Yeah,
pretty clear. Like that's where they're weaker, but the bullpen needs help too. When you say,
the
oh,
bullpen
it's,
definitely needs help, but I still think offense is going to do more damage for them in the long run.
I mean, literally. Yeah, let's get it going. You've got some pretty good offensive teams in this division. You got to keep pace with them. You get some more chances to try to blow back the Giants with 3 games against them now. Coming up for their next series, we've got the Phillies after that, 3 games, and then 4 for Arizona to take them on. And, you know, you have to expect that Arizona and San Francisco can be winnable for this team, but not with the way they've been playing per se. And then Philadelphia is going to be a big stopgap in the middle. Can Chicago turn it around? They need to do it pretty much now. I'm going to shoot first at number 29 up next. And I will go with I'm going to go with the Colorado Rockies just to get them out of the way. I know, guys, the low-hanging fruit this week, but this is the lowest of the low. I think Miami and Chicago, the other teams that are usually in this level of the basement, did have better weeks. So I'm just going to go straight for those Rockies and point out that they did go 2-6. They lost 2 of 3 at versus the Nationals. Excuse me, guys. Houston took both games against the Rockies this week that they played in a strange rematch of that Mexico series. These little 2-game series, man. They why bother?
Yeah.
And then the Chicago White Sox of all teams actually took 2 away from them too. So Colorado, already a perennial bottom feeder in our conversations, must we really talk about why? Maybe talk to me about some of the pieces you expect to see move around out of Colorado here as we're getting closer to trade deadline. Can I say, I mean, would anyone, I know, there's no way no one's getting Chris Bryant, right? Nobody wants him. Nobody would smell him. There's nothing Colorado can do to get rid of him. The contract's too bad. So, like, what can you do? Why would you move a Charlie Blackmon at this stage of his career? Like, does anybody want anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Colorado?
Not unless Tovar and McMahon are on the board, Warren, and that you would get great returns for him. But those are the guys you need to build around. So I hope not. But if Colorado wants to make a move, it would be for one of them, I think.
Yeah, I personally have had my eye on Ryan McMahon as one of the bright spots on this team to come over to Seattle, who could use a consistent bat, but that's about all I can shoot at. I don't really want to talk about Colorado anymore, bud. Go ahead and hit number 27.
Yeah, dude, 1-4 at home is just unacceptable. So we're just gonna move right along. Forget you, Colorado. um,
Who?
exactly. So next up, Warren. So if we're looking at everything, I'm gonna have to kind of jump off that Colorado team we just talked about, and next up is gonna have to be the Washington Nationals. because their only
Ooh.
series win this week, Warren, was against Colorado. They had a 3-6 week, opened it up with a series win, took 2 games out of 3 over Colorado, in Colorado, no less. So they got a nice little burst out from their offense. But that was the bright spot of the week, because then they took a trip to San Diego and they got swept by the Padres. Pretty ugly. The road trip
Mhm.
continued, though. 3 games in Tampa Bay. They only got 1 win out of those 3. And
Yeah.
again, the main theme of all of this is really just the disappearing offense, unfortunately, for these Nats, Warren. At this point, it's exciting to think about some of the prospects coming up. And the big news is that their top
Mhm.
prospect in the national system, James Woods, is going to be debuting for the team in their next series against the Mets. Really
Ooh.
exciting, Warren. He is one of the main pieces they got back in that Juan Soto trade, along with CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore, who are currently on the
Yes.
team. So all of those pieces are starting to come to fruition, and we'll see what Woods can do. It could be the beginning of that youth revolution in Washington.
Yes, and we have been looking forward to that. I think Dylan Cruz was another name you gave us at the beginning of the year that may get called up as part of this youth exploration movement. Um, so if the Nationals can stay competitive enough, they're not nearly out of any races. But this week did give them a bit of a hit, and they find themselves reeling a tad. They had such a good week last week too that it seemed like they'd figured something out. Maybe that CJ Abrams MRI we reported last week that it caught up with them a tad. You know, you don't want CJ Abrams off the field for the Nationals if you're expecting them to continue to be impressive, but they will have an opportunity to rebound. Of course, everybody does from week to week. And this week it will be first 4 games against the Mets. So we'll really see how you're feeling. Hopefully, I predict maybe 3 or 4 on that one for you.
Play
Four,
it.
yeah, why not? Why not? 3 or 4 from where it's looking at right now. 4 games against St. Louis will follow that, and St. Louis has been good for now 3 weeks in a row. Spoiler alert: we don't talk about the Redbirds for a while today again. But then they retouch in with the Mets again, another 3 games. I mean, you're going to be sick of them the next time you and I talk, unless, of course, all they do is feed your Mets some wins. So I'll maybe put those vibes out in the universe for you, my friend. But uh, beyond that, the Nationals are still trying to figure out long-term solutions and really where they stand in this season. And, well, though a good week could really help turn that around. How about this one, Dan? I'm going to make sure Toronto gets out of the way right now. And I know what you're thinking. The Toronto Blue Jays at number 27. Yes, Dan picked 28, guys. I'm sorry. I got jumped the gun. I was so excited to call Toronto the 27th best team and therefore the 4th worst in our league that I got my numbers mixed up. But at number 27, this is home for Toronto this week because I called them done personally on our mid-season predictions breakdown where we kind of touch base with ourselves, and I still feel that way. After a 3-6 week where they drop all 3 to Cleveland, they split a weird 2 in Boston after the 3rd game gets suspended until August. That should be fun. Pick up that in the top of the 2nd at 0-0. And then splitting 4 in New York. I mean, there's something that says Toronto might be getting good now, but isn't it too late? Sell your pieces. Get it over with. This storyline should change. I'm ready. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, dude, it's official now. Like, Toronto made their change the last couple of years to pivot away from offense and in for defense. We've talked about
Mm.
it. At this point, though, they're 22nd in the league in ERA. They're 26th in runs. Like, it's not working anywhere. They're calling up some of their younger prospects, which is great. Like we talked about. I mean, at this point, you got Biggio is just not on the team anymore, and it's opened the
Oh,
door for some of the younger guys. So one of their young infielders, or Elvis Martinez, debuted for the team, did pretty well, got a hit in his first game, and then the next day got suspended for 80 games for a PED violation, which just
oh
depletes
man.
their depth and even more. So it's not looking good for Toronto. You're right to have them down here, Ward. It's time for the sell off. I'm sorry to say.
Ooh, are you calling them done? Are you calling them done?
Not until the sell off. It's time
Oh,
for a sell off.
okay.
Warren, you called this team done. This is your Arizona pick. But until
Okay.
they start selling off, until Vladdy's gone and the rest of them, I'm giving them time.
fine, but the writing's on the wall, and this team is not turning around to the level they'll need to. They have to get through Boston, they have to get through Seattle, they have to get through Kansas City, they have to get through, etc., etc., etc. So tough world to be a wild card team this year right now, and Toronto ain't it. That's how I feel. So yeah, I call him done. I call him done. All right, dude. Number 26, even Steven with me, buddy. Number 26, what do you got, Dan?
Number 26. This is a tough one, dude, but unfortunately, not a single series win. We're going to have to do the Seattle Mariners.
Oh,
They're
that was
pretty
my
low. Pretty low, man, but a 3-6 week, a series loss to Miami, Tampa Bay, and Minnesota, 1-2 in all three of those series. And what happened, dude? Warren, I'll leave it to you. I heard Brian Wu got hurt. I heard that
Mhm.
Miller's been struggling on the road, but what's going on?
Well, I mean, the laundry list. This was a terrible week, and we finally had one. So there you go. Chalk up the Seattle Mariners to the low end of the pool. And, great headlines that you just shared. It's true that Brian Wu cannot stay healthy. Definitely concerning. We keep getting MRIs back that say nothing super duper wrong, but this might be a guy that's better suited for the bullpen. This might be a guy who's better suited, for a team that does do those concerted openers instead of starters. If we want to get a 7 pitch turn out of every single one of our starting pitchers every time, Wu just might not have the body for it because it's happening over and over and over again. And I've been aware of his injuries almost as long as I've been aware of him himself. So that's concerning. I've thought about whatever. We can move on from him. Offensively, that's the problem. Offensively is the problem. The strikeout count is puke inducing for me to have to continue to confess. We're just the worst, of course, in that setting still. 877, 37 ahead of Oakland on that. We are 877 strikeouts into the season, and every single one hurts my heart at this point because our offense needs to be better. And Dan, I've been thinking about it all week because I thought you might. I don't know if you're going to ask me in the future, so cut me off quick if you want me to not answer this. But you asked me, which starter would I trade? Which starter on my 5 would I trade? And honestly, Wu is too easy for me to point at as somebody I already thought about sending to those teams I just discussed, right? Like a Cleveland or a National League team that loves opening with like 3 innings for their starter before putting someone else in. Got it? So I'm going to tell you, dude, I'd rather lose Luis Castillo. I know that's crazy. The Rock,
Yeah.
La Piedra, I mean, he's the ace theoretically, but he just doesn't look like an ace. And I don't see him having as much upside left in his career like a Bryce
Wow.
Miller might, or a George Kirby might, or a Logan Gilbert might. So taking Wu out of the equation, I have to say Castillo because Wu's too easy. But I did want to answer that question for you. But it's really all about the offense. The offense is trash, dude. And we've been saying it week in and week out. I want trades. I want Polanco out. I want Haniger out. Sorry, Mitch. I love you for what you've done for Seattle to this point. You're not getting it done in 2024. Let's move on. Dano, I'm glad you got that bullet out of the way because now I can run roughshod off the rest of the league. And next to take a bullet, 2 weeks ago's number 1 team, the Cincinnati Reds. You talk about expectation versus reality, and the reality was that the Cincinnati Reds at 4-6 just didn't have the week they needed to have to keep that positive buzz around their team brewing, and that storyline of them being capable of taking on all comers strong for me in my mind. So, guys, they dropped 2 of 3 to Boston. They dropped 2 of 3 to Pittsburgh, and they split 4 games with St. Louis. Another team that didn't win a series this week. Dan, if you had to throw somebody else under the bus, but it's okay. I can throw Cincinnati here. So just a mediocre team, not getting what they needed to look strong. But when they do win, they tend to do it with a lot of runs. We will give them credit for that. When they're on, they're on. What are your take on the Red Legs this week, Dan?
Yeah, I feel like we still haven't seen the full picture for the Reds, right? We expect a stronger second half for them. TJ got hurt again, so unfortunately, that's another piece that's going to be missing. But
Hmm.
Noel V. Marte is finally back. His suspension is over. He was running through a little rehab assignment. He will finally rejoin the team as cold as ice, Warren, just like every other player we've seen join late. So who knows how long before he'll get up to speed. But the one good thing is him starting at third base allows Candelario to be more of a DH and get Spencer Steers, hopefully stay at first base. And we talked about them moving around pieces a lot. Hopefully, this helps everyone settle a little bit, and maybe we'll see a little bit more consistency the rest of the way.
Yeah, it's time to solidify some of those game plans and know what you're going to do to counterpunch your opponents. Cincinnati, well, got counterpunched out this week a little bit more often than they would like. So they do have to sit here. Noel Marte, I thought I did notice, absolutely crushed a bomb in game one with the team, having been back. Looks like those PEDs paid off. What can I say?
Still some
Uh,
lingering in his system, maybe.
yeah, make that guy pee in a cup real quick, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I don't have anything against the guy. Good luck and get that bat swinging because Cincinnati needs you, buddy. And Dan, 24 falls to you.
Thanks, man. And, this might seem a little out of place, but I think it's a little high for them. They should be pretty proud. We're going to go with the Chicago White Sox. Not a bad week for the White Sox. Not
That's
going to give
funny.
them too much credit, Warren, because there's good mixed in with the ugly. It was a 4-6 week for the White Sox, and it was a little bit of everything. They started off with a 3-game series against Detroit, where they only managed one win out of the three, so 1-2 in that series. Then they got swept by the Dodgers. Quick 1-game trip with Atlanta, which was a win, Warren. They beat the
Yeah.
Atlanta Braves 1-0 in a tight game. And then
I
they
don't
had
think
well,
Atlanta showed up. I don't think Atlanta showed up. I just want to
oh,
say that. That was my joke. I wanted to
oh,
use that.
okay, I get you. Well, you know what? To finish off the week, Colorado came to town. They took 2 out of 3 against Colorado. So technically, that's only one series win, Warren. I wouldn't count that one game against Atlanta as a series. The important thing here is we do see them moving in the right direction, and it's all taken with a grain of salt because we know that there are scouts at all of these White Sox games, and the reports right now, Warren, are there's Dodgers scouts, Padres scouts, and Mariners scouts sitting in the dugout and just trying to get a read on their guys. So, I mean, the word of it, honestly, is which outfielder is Seattle going to go for, Warren? Who are they going to spend the most money on? Or do they let the Dodgers or the Padres or somebody else make that move, let them get Robert Jr., and then grab like a Tommy Pham type? That's the feeling I'm getting now.
Ooh, so it depends on the asking price. If it's going to be Luis Robert, we're going to give up a lot of that super impressive farm Seattle has. And if you hadn't heard, they've got like 7 near 100 top prospects or something like that. So that's exciting stuff to think that we could grab a Luis Robert, but he also has strikeout issues,
He
like do we
does.
really need him to be that guy? I don't know
Right.
if he has to. So maybe it is a Tommy Pham that would be a little less expensive and certainly a go-getter, a bench galvanizer. He reminds me a bit of what I would expect a Carlos Santana to be for the Seattle lineup like Santana was in 2022. So I like that we seem to be paying attention to Chicago for some of their power hitters. My vote is to do something smaller because I don't want to give up the farm, but that's really all we can talk about when it comes to the White Sox, guys, who they're going to get rid of. Joining the outfielders, of course, is Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet. Huge pitching names on the move. You have to think contenders like Atlanta want somebody like Garrett Crochet. Shoot, anybody could benefit from having an arm like that. But especially ones that have injured arms at the moment. So looking at them for me. And then Eric Fetty, a less maybe impressive starter, can probably go to somebody still trying to battle their way into the playoffs. I bet, like maybe, could it be crazy enough that Toronto swings for them to try to get back in at the last second? Could
Oh,
that be what they
maybe.
need? Meh, anything can happen. But what we do know will happen is that the Chicago White Sox will win only as many games as they will allow themselves to in order to run away from the worst record in baseball history. So now we are almost out of teams that did bad. We have but two left. One, the traditional low-hanging fruit, and the other, one of the best teams in the American League. So I will go with the traditional low-hanging fruit at number 23, the Oakland Athletics. Yes, another disappointing week for an athletics team that's kind of done pretending to be interesting. They are 2-6 after this week, or from this week's games, I should say. They did lose 2 of 3 to Minnesota. They get swept by the Angels. More on them later. They're just flying high. Anyway, and Arizona also took 2 of 3 from them. So another team that didn't win a single season or series, excuse me, and did give up a sweep in the middle of all that action. But are you surprised? Probably not. Oakland is this bad. Dan, your take on how bad Oakland can be.
Yeah, they could get worse, dude, if we see them get gutted by the deadline. They already made a move. You may have seen they actually moved on from JD Davis. They
Yes, I
started
saw
by
that.
DFAing him, but they actually managed to swing a trade before the process was complete and he elected free agency. So they moved him to the Yankees and they got back a young infielder by the name of Jordan Groshans, which is funny, Warren. If you had told me that near the deadline the A's would get younger and and cheaper, I would not have guessed that
No,
necessarily. So
no.
it's surprising. It shows us that they might be willing to move not just the youth prospects that are doing well, but the sum of the older players they have just to get whatever they can back. But yeah, this team is very much just seeing some offensive outbursts for now before we inevitably see them sell off. Except for Miller, Warren. I wouldn't be surprised to see Miller stay with
Hmm.
the team because I bet that price is so high right now, there might not be a team willing to pay it. And I think Oakland would be fine holding on to Miller, especially if they sell off guys like Rooker and a lot of these other guys.
One thing I wanted to say about Miller before we move on from Oakland is that I notice he's not a rookie and that he's been in the system and playing for this team a couple years. Just now, this year, as the closer, has he found his true potential? I gotta say kudos to Oakland's pitching coaches then, because like they turned Mason Miller into this after a few years scuffling around and working his way up as a prospect. Right? They found the role, they made the man, and now he's like everybody's buzz in Oakland. So I just want to give him some credit. Might as well give some credit while I can. There's not a whole lot of credit to give to Oakland left. And that is going to be especially true after they do give away the majority of their exciting pieces at the deadline. At least that's what we expect. It's got to be what we expect. And as we expect to move into number 22 in our countdown, we have but one really poopy team left record wise this week. Is Dan shooting at them? I don't know. They're a really big name in our playoff patterns. What do you got, Dan?
Well, I gotta shoot at him, dude, because it's just too easy, and I'm gonna take full advantage of it. It's the New York Yankees. Oh,
Ooh,
how they've fallen, Warren. How they've fallen.
wow.
A 3-6 week.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable this week. They had a 3-game series against Atlanta. They could only manage one win. And then they got swept by the New York Mets, Warren. They lost the Subway Series, and it wasn't even
Yes.
close. They got stepped on by the Mets. It was awesome, actually.
Yeah, I bet. I can hear the horns now.
Yeah, man. And then 4-game series against Toronto, which they split 2-2. And that's, the kind of
Mm.
series that they would win in the past. So really tough week for the Yankees. We saw Soto back in the lineup and we saw Judge kind of go on this nuts tear. And the main thing is really just the rest of the lineup is starting to fall away, Warren. The injuries are starting to really build up for this team. We have guys
Mm-hmm.
that are not playing 100%. Obviously, Stanton is on the shelf, Rizzo's on the shelf, but JD Davis, since joining the Yankees, has not done super well. You got guys like Jose Trevino and Gleyber Torres just with pitiful averages. And you're
Mm-hmm.
getting to that point where, like, we talked about the injury history with guys playing center field and the worry about Aaron Judge, right? He's played really well there, Warren. No doubt Aaron Judge has played great in center field. But at this point, and Stanton's out too, by the way, at the DH position, I would be
Right.
so worried to lose Aaron Judge because we've seen Juan Soto alone on a Nationals team or a Padres team where he has proven that as good as he is, he's not enough to get this team over the hump alone. Right.
Right.
And obviously, Soto and Judge is a great 1-2 punch, but it's just barely enough to keep this team competitive. We see the week like this or the rest of the lineup isn't good enough. If you lose Judge, Warren, or Soto, one of the two, like you're done. You're not keeping up with Baltimore. I think that's become pretty clear. So they're still rolling him out in center field. Judge has talked about how much he loves it, but I'm more nervous than ever going in the second half of the year if I'm the Yankees. You got to work on your depth big time with some trades. And I would even get another center fielder just to make sure your outfielders stay healthy.
Let me tell you something. High risk, high reward. That is how the Yankees built this team, and the risk is now so high that they are indeed one or two key injuries away from it all falling apart and it all being for naught. And that was the other side of the coin that we presented in our preseason predictions, where we're like, this could be Darth Vader, or it could be little kid Anakin getting clipped out from the pod racer before his time. God, the analogies are bad tonight. But you get what I'm trying to say. The risk is high, and it could very much not pay off if any other of these fragile pieces fall by the wayside. I'm kind of glad you shot at the Yankees, because you're right. How often do you get to at this point? But it was an awfully disappointing week for them. So for them to fall to 22, choice there, Dan. I like it. We've got two poopy teams at this point. Poopy teams. I feel this way. Both of them should have been playoff contenders, but at this point, neither of them are, and one of them's our world champion, so why don't I just go with them? The Texas Rangers. I must have called out their name in our countdowns more often than any other team so far, like in a disappointing tone. These Rangers are not ready to defend their title. And as we've talked about 3 or 4 times in different videos this week, it feels as if they rested on their laurels when they won the World Series, and they felt like they were going to be able to generally run it back, despite the fact that many of their important pieces are aging pitchers who have been on the shelf all year, and offensive flashes in the pan, and rookies who can't prove that they really are the money that they think they are. Was that too much of a run-on sentence? I bet it was. What I'm trying to tell you all is that, well, DeGrom and Scherzer coming back might not necessarily save this team. And the young guns like Evan Carter and Josh Young, hey, kudos to Josh Smith. He's been playing great. But generally, not everybody is proven to make this turn around. Dan, do you think they will? I just can't bank on it at this stage. These are the champs. Are they down and out?
So hard to tell, dude. When you go out and you sweep a team like Kansas City and leave them shut out in 2 of those games, but then turn around and get swept by Milwaukee, it's so confusing. And as far as the rotation you mentioned is concerned, Warren, Scherzer is not the worst with the few starts that he's had, and he's basically going to be filling in for Dane Dunning, one of the guys. It's important to remember, I should preface, the Rangers have really pulled heavily from their bullpen to support the starting rotation while all these guys have been out. Things have been bad. It's important to consider as they restock the rotation, they're moving guys back into the bullpen. So Dane Dunning goes back into the bullpen. When Malley and DeGrom come back, you probably have Heaney and Lorenzen moving back into the bullpen. That's going to strengthen your bullpen a lot. It's even going to make up for the fact if one of those 3 guys returning to the rotation struggle, you have one of these guys that can come in for even short inning relief if they need to. So that might actually bode a lot better for both the bullpen and the rotation. Because say what you will, like about Max and DeGrom and all these guys, they'll probably do better than Dane Dunning and Michael Lorenzen on the regular, right? So I have a little bit more faith on that side of things. That's not to say that they won't struggle. It's just to say that the bullpen might be a bit more consistent. The starters might go a bit deeper. That won't help them with the offensive struggles, as you mentioned, Warren. We know that if they were fully healthy, then maybe they'd be a little bit more potent. But even then, we haven't seen that spark that we saw last year. Corey Seager's averages is dipping back down below 300 now, and it might be too little too late for this Texas team.
And not only that, but I think I saw that Corey Seager exited today after getting a ball to the wrist, and that scares them, obviously. It's not what you want. He did, unfortunately. So news is still out on whether that's going to be a problematic injury in and of itself. But you have a good point. When you have so many pitchers coming back to bolster a bullpen, and especially its back end, could be super helpful when you can get names like Heaney in there and Dunning and maybe Michael Lorenzen. You're right, former All-Star pitcher last year with the Tigers. So like it can be amazing to be able to backload all these arms. But the other thing I really think about with these guys is health still. Health for the pitchers, these aging pitchers. Like, I don't know. I feel like last time DeGrom came back with some fanfare, he threw a couple pitches and it was over. And he was back out on the shelf. So, I don't know. I'm just not saying that's a proven commodity either. And that's where we'll let the Texas Rangers lie for this week. All bloody and beaten and still wondering, can we even look like champs? Time is certainly super duper running out on this. I mean, it's bad. Number 20 is also your pick, Dano. Are you going to pick my other poopy team, or do you have somebody else in mind?
I have something else in mind, Warren, because I'm pretty disappointed in this team. It's gonna have to be at this point the Baltimore Orioles. They're
Whoa. Okay.
pretty uncharacteristic week. They started it off by getting swept by the Houston Astros, Warren, lost 3 in a row.
Yeah.
And then they lost the next 2 of the first 3 against Cleveland. They did manage 1 win in that series, but they opened the week with a 5-game losing streak. Pretty rough. And they luckily had a 4-game series against Texas. They won 3 of those to kind of slightly get back on track. But this happened the same time we mentioned already. The Yankees were going through their own little losing streak. So the O's were able to jump ahead of the Yankees in the standings, but they kind of missed out on an opportunity to really put some distance between themselves and with their biggest rivals up until this point. So that's a little bit part of the reason why they're going to be a little bit further down here. I mean, as far as the rest of the offense on the team, that's not really of any concern. You got Gunnar Henderson at 26 home runs. Nobody else is really close as far as shortstops are concerned. I actually think, Warren, at this point of the season, Gunnar could be the first shortstop since A-Rod to have 50 in a season. And granted, that was in 01 and 2.
Wow.
A-Rod may have had a little help those years, but what do you think about that, Warren? The chances that Gunnar could be the first shortstop to do it in over 20 years, 50 home runs.
I mean, I didn't know he had that kind of power in him last season, but he's exploded onto the scene in a major way. Like, as much clout was behind his name before the season started, he's climbing into MVP contention conversations, right? And it's exciting to see. Yes, the word is could. He could do it. He could do something not seen in a long time. And if he does, it's going to be a game changer to his reputation and his star power, to say the least. And the way teams take him under consideration when they play against him on the diamond. The other side of it is that, powers come in bursts and maybe he won't be able to pull it off. And even still, he's having a great year and his stock is rising considerably, at least at this stage. If he even has a similar half on the back end as he's had on the front end, Gunnar Henderson really is an MVP candidate. So kudos to him. Amazing work. Baltimore's crazy good. So having them this low, I get it. All the justifications. It's a good place to slide them in. And like the Yankees, you don't get to put them down low very often. So Dan, once again, you are playing with fire tonight and you are burning your chances down. Boy, talk about a wild card over here, guys. Sheesh. So I get number 19, and I will fill it with the other team I would have put if it hadn't been the Rangers here, and that is the Detroit Tigers, who started off last week's countdown, and this week did enough to make me go, okay, guys, I'm sorry I laid the smackdown on you. I mean, after all, they did win a series. They did win a series this week. Against the White Sox. Okay, never mind. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but they did. Nope. They lost that series too. That was to Philadelphia. They lost 3 out of 4 to the Angels as well. And guys, regardless of those last 2 teams having better weeks, period, the Tigers are not a team that looks, as I've said, ready for the playoffs in any way, shape, or form, and it just continues. They'll have to try to bounce back against Minnesota this week with 3 games, 4 against Cleveland, but on the other, in between those two series will be 3 at Cincinnati, which maybe their one chance to show that they can beat a middling team. Because Minnesota and Cleveland are just better, and I expect them to play that way. Detroit's the next team on Dan. Is there any hope?
No, this is more of like growing pains you see them going through, and just sounds like a broken record at this point, Warren. But the inconsistent offense, you got like Riley Green and Colt Keith being kind of the stars, but also being just horribly inconsistent to the point that this team can't really get anything going. I'm really kind of curious. I wonder what you think, Warren. This being one a little bit more in your wheelhouse with the American League. Is Detroit in kind of a holding pattern? Like maybe they'll run it back again next year, try and make some acquisitions in the offseason, or can you see them making any moves at the deadline? I mean, they have a couple pieces that some people might be interested in.
The Detroit Tigers seem like a team that has done a lot of years of investing in themselves to really, sell everything off if the chance presents itself. I don't see them wanting to do that at all. I see them thinking that they are still just a year or two away from being strong enough to make pushes. And there's plenty of young talent that, while is interesting, I love me some Kerry Carpenter, as I've said in the past. Let alone all of the other players on this group that are so interesting that get more mainstream buzz, like Riley Green and Colt Keith. I just see this. Oh, Matt Vierling too. That kid can play from time to time, but I see this as a team that won't get rid of those young guns I just talked about, but may want to move on from Gio Urshela. Maybe that's a name that can go bye-bye. I can think maybe Mark Canha, another one of those MLB Swiss Army knife veterans. He's having a good year. Give him to a playoff contender. Hi, Seattle could use him. We would like to keep looking, but again, anyone who's like getting a little long in the tooth and was picked up to be the veteran pieces of this lineup for a potential playoff run, like those two aforementioned, feel to me like the most expendable if they sell anybody. But I don't think Detroit's going to be selling their young guns. There's no reason to do that. They've still got enough potential upside that they're okay. Like you said a couple weeks ago, the dumbest thing they can do is get rid of a name like Scooball, for example, who's got enough, So why would you do that with your offensive youth too? Just keep it to those vets that you brought in to strengthen the lineup. That's all I got. Stay patient, but maybe a couple years patient still. Sorry, Detroit. You just couldn't get out of the gate fast enough this year to help us feel like you're ready to make a jump. You're still only 8 games under 500, but you're also 8 games under 500. So it's a whole 10th of the season left at this point. I think we could pass the baton on that, my friend. Do you have a 18th pick for me?
Hey man, nothing too crazy here. We're gonna go for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, they keep getting. Yeah, go.
Yeah, 4-5 week. They took 1 out of 3 against Tampa Bay, and then they actually won a series against Cincinnati. Warren took 2 out of 3 there, and then took just 1 out of 3 against Atlanta. So they didn't get swept or anything. Actually, pretty gutsy win to win that last one against Atlanta, in Atlanta, no less. And the big news of this past month, really, Warren, has been Brian Reynolds. He's completely broken out. He's used to getting hot around this time in June. But as far as June goes, he's had a 22-game hitting streak. He's led the majors over that time with a 360 average, 6 home runs, and 16 RBIs. That streak has since ended, but that really woke him up, gave him the second best offensive OPS for an outfielder in the National League. Just want to make sure I got that right with 822, not too shabby. So Brian Reynolds, exactly what we wanted to see. Oh no, Cruz too, Warren. He hit a home run in this last game against Atlanta, which you needed to see. And man, that kid's got power. It looked like no swing at all, and it went like 470 feet. So who knows? Maybe we will see him in the home run derby after all.
Well, it's all about how quickly he can make that impression and make it stick. I mean, I think a lot of if I still remember what he did in the preseason, you have to think the professionals do, right? So maybe he will find himself there. but the power is definitely there. I have seen a couple of those dingers myself too, where it just looks like he's like, "Oh, Dane, I tapped it," and it's like to the moon.
Gone.
So yeah, O'Neal Cruz definitely has the potential, and that's really all we can say about Pittsburgh. So much potential. The future's bright for this team. They will probably be more interesting sooner rather than later. Now may not be the time for them to be in playoff contention, but hey, Brian Reynolds is the type of bat that makes me want to say, I told you so, because I said he could get going. He's getting going, and it's exciting to see. It makes this lineup look so much better, and it makes Pittsburgh look so much better. So, could they surprise us and make a push this year? It's not out of the question, but they need more like this. More like this from Brian Reynolds. And I'm not going to pretend like I wouldn't be excited to see that. I love watching losing franchises become winners. Can't tell if you know that, but Pittsburgh for sure deserves a turnaround in their reputation as long as they choose to grasp it instead of, again, selling off all their most exciting pieces so they don't have to pay them massive contracts. It's understandable though. I get it. Pittsburgh is an interesting choice from you, though, only because I've gotten used to hearing them kind of sneak through our selections a little longer into our countdowns. So to see them fall off the board left me a little flat-footed. I'm like, darn, I need an old, reliable, mediocre team here. And lo and behold, I found one in the form of a team that's actually pretty bad, but had a great week. And I need to tip my cap to the Miami Marlins. At 5-5.
Miami.
Yeah, Miami. Good for you guys. Winning baseball games. I think you got 2 more home wins this week. Against my Mariners, of course. You won 2 out of 3 against them. Bummer for Seattle. You now have 16 home wins, I think is the number, actually. Kansas City did take 2 of 3 games from them, which was needed for Kansas City. They needed to lick their wounds. And then Philadelphia split a series with them. So there's something in Miami's water right now that makes them feel like they can walk with some extra swagger and puff out their chest a little bit more. Brian De La Cruz and Jazz Chisholm Jr. and Jake Berger, and Josh Bell. Those are the guys who can still get it done in Miami, but will they be in Miami much longer? All of them are great candidates for trades if you have me thinking about it, especially guys like Josh and Berger. What do you think, Dan, about Miami and how, exciting, interesting, spunky, or plucky they were this week?
Yeah, very plucky, and didn't get swept. Got 5 wins on the week, 2 at home. I mean, Miami has had a heck of a June, Warren. They've really lifted themselves out from that basement where they were stuck between Colorado and Chicago. They're any good, but they're not in that position anymore. But you're right.
Right.
It's worth considering what this team will look like after the deadline. We might only see 1 or 2 more pieces really go. Peter Bendix will be aggressive in trying to sell off, but he's not going to be reckless about it. So I'm sure we'll see a few arms and probably one of maybe a Josh Bell type off of the team. But yeah, Berger and Jazz, you mentioned, have kind of been that spark, and I could see them holding on to guys like that to rebuild around this team. And Warren, it's so funny. I think that Burger King has been listening in, dude. We know that they're tuning into the podcast because I think they've heard how disappointed Miami's been with the promotion. Because you're right, 2 more wins, they're up to 16, but it's pretty disappointing halfway through the year, just 16 home wins. So they pulled their punches and they decided to just give everybody that has a ticket to a Miami home game a BOGO deal. Buy a burger, get a burger, because you're just not getting enough free burgers. And hey, because we feel bad, Warren, about the whole burger thing, now you're going to get a custom Miami Marlins Burger King crown. Yeah, bring a couple of those to the ballpark. See if you can get somebody to hit a home run.
I can't tell you how badly I want a vacation to Miami so I can get a crown. I just want the crown. That's so cool. You included the design in our notes here, guys. You got to look this up. I'm 5 again looking at this thing. So you Miami kids, you mail me one, okay? I want my crown, okay? You guys got 2 out of 3 wins on us this week, so I get something out of it. But yes, hilarious. Will Miami be a completely shelled team by the end of the season? Maybe not, because you're right. They do think they have a future to invest in when Sandy Alcantara comes back, one of the finest arms in the league, before his season-ending injury. So we'll hope that they don't absolutely trade away the entire opportunity to be something in the future, or the near future, because Miami thinks they're a few steps away or something. You're hilarious. You guys are not playing that way, but maybe you're choosing to, and I get that. Okay, so with Miami dead in the water, Dan, and with the 16th pick, we are nearing the halftime already, making a good pace tonight. What would you like to say is the final team before we get to the midpoint of our countdown?
This is a tough one to find somebody that's going to kind of nicely, snugly fit in here. So I think I found a team with a 4-5 record, Warren, that should pretty much do the job. Let's do the Arizona Diamondbacks. 4-5
Yes.
week for Arizona. They only managed one win in a series against the Phillies. That's a tough team, obviously, right? Then a series against Minnesota, another tough team. Only one win there, too. Okay, Arizona already 2-4 on the week.
Mm-hmm.
Oakland's coming up next, and they took 2 out of 3 against them. Needed that to get closer to 500 and stick around. You already know, Warren, my feelings on this team. Zach Allen is back with them, which
Yes.
that truly is going to bode pretty well. And it is worth mentioning that Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has really done a lot better of late through June. He's gotten his batting average back up. He's into double-digit home runs. It's a huge part of their offense that's been lacking. So a lot of the pieces are starting to move in the right direction, but I don't know what you think, Warren. For me, it's a little too late once again.
Right. You called them done weeks ago, and why would you retract that now? I mean, they did have a pretty strong week last week, and it was refreshing to see, but now they find themselves tipping back into a negative direction. I mean, there are a few players, as you said, getting hotter. Neither of them are Corbin Carroll, I noticed, which is kind of what you really want to hear. It would be a rebound for that young star. There's also buzz around Paul Sewald moving back away from Arizona to come back to Seattle, is some of the buzz I've heard. So, not that I would hate that for the bullpen help, but it would be an indictment of where Arizona is right now. So, this is not obviously ideal, and this is a team that has floundered enough that it's understandable why you would call them truly and strictly done. But at 41 and 43, and seeing how much upward momentum was capable this past week, you have to expect from other teams, you have to expect that Arizona can still surge. They really can. They don't play like a team whose pieces are in place to do that, but they weren't last year around this time too. So I don't know, man. I'm not saying I want you to get ready to eat your hat, but I will say you called Arizona done a long time ago, and it could have been premature if some things start getting better. But that's a
We'll
lot of
see.
ifs. Yeah, I know that's a lot of ifs, but it is getting dry in the desert. We'll see what happens. But Arizona sitting here makes perfect sense. And now it's time for me to attack the middle of our countdown. Number 15 is staring at me in the face, and I hate number 15. It's like poop or get off the pot is one of my favorite terms for this specific spot in our lineup. And one team that just seems to be pooping is San Francisco. San Francisco had a great week last week too, or was it actually the week before? Either way, we're talking about one of the more up and down, up and down, up and down kind of teams. This week, their biggest claim to fame may have been a pretty important 3-game series win over those Cubs. That was a shot to Chicago for sure. But they also, oh, lo and behold, took 2 of 3 from the Dodgers. How did they do that? I know that audio won't even come in. I saw Dan remove his headset. I'm sorry, guys. I shouldn't be doing that high pitch stuff anymore. But the Dodgers dropped 2 of 3 to these Giants, and my jaw is slack. They would be even higher if it weren't for the fact that St. Louis swept them to start off their week. Not a whole lot of home run hitting kings coming out of this lineup, so that storyline still isn't too exciting. But no one's getting closer to 30 anyway, Dan. Like super close. As a matter of fact, I'm curious if anybody broke 10 this week. But Dan, San Francisco is not my favorite choice to bust through the playoff wall. And while they sit at 41-44 and can still make a run, a 5-5 week does not move us either way. So I'm going to keep them right down here, right in the middle where they belong. What do you think, Dan? How do you feel about San Francisco this week?
Yeah, I may have had them a little bit higher because of those wins against LA, but you're right. A sweep against the competitive National League team is just no good. Home run leaders, Warren Ramos is at 10 and Chapman's at 11. So definitely not going to hit 30 again. I mean, I say definitely. It would take it a crazy run. It is definitely possible, but very unlikely, unfortunately, for San Francisco. And yeah, they did take 2 wins over LA. It's absolutely true. It's worth noting, I think, Warren, their one loss against LA, it was a 14-7 loss in which they intentionally walked Shohei Ohtani twice. In one instance, giving up, walking him and filling the bases to have Will Smith come up, who then crushed like the second ball he hit, which is just like more levels of the Giants were disrespecting other players on their team, on other teams. Like it's just endless.
Yeah, there it is. Disrespect is definitely a theme for me with this organization. I've been disappointed in the way they treat their players, and now they're making mistakes on the diamond, reflective of a disrespectful dude. Get your attitude right, Giants. You're not that high and mighty. You're not that tall and strong. Okay, you've got a beautiful ballpark by the ocean. I can't help but think about and smell the sea every time. And I miss the idea of visiting there maybe one day. But again, it'll be for the road team, most definitely. Not a fan of these Giants right now. And it's a bummer because I picked them as one of my teams that I will control in MLB The Show, and I'll play every single one of their games, and I regret it. I did it just for the ballpark, and I want you to know that. One of your playoff picks, Dan, I will say that. We'll see if they can, I don't know, resemble a playoff choice in the near
Blake
future.
Snell's still looking for his talent, Warren. So,
ouch, Blake. I'm really glad he didn't come to Seattle, for the record, right? Like,
right? Imagine, whoa.
With the way this year has gone, man, it would be just a mistake, and maybe some part of us knew that, and maybe, yeah. Anyway, why else would a guy going, I want to go to Seattle, not go to Seattle? Because we don't want to pay you. Anyway, number 14 is also you, Dan, and only a few mediocre teams left before we get to the Greenies this week, because there were some good winners. Who do you have for number 14?
Yeah, for 14, after a 4-4 week, we're going to go for the Boston Red Sox.
Ooh, how the mighty
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah, sliding backwards a little bit for Boston. They're still sticking out above 500 with a positive run differential, which is really impressive, but just a 4-4 week for them. They took 2 out of 3 against Cincinnati, and then they had a 3-game series against Toronto, but their third game was, I think, as you had mentioned already, we talked about Toronto, suspended due to rain. So it ended up being a split over 2 games with Toronto. And then they took just 1 out of 3 against San Diego. So a split and 2 series losses here. Not the week that the Red Sox would have wanted. I mean, the Red Sox are bad, but they've always been good enough recently and have really strong pitching to stay competitive. And I think we just saw a lot of that competitiveness fade this week. David Hamilton is just unworldly for this team, and he's taking them to new heights, which is super exciting. But I still don't see them being consistent enough to be a real threat and playoff team at this point.
Ooh, you say that now, but in a couple weeks when they go like 8-2, it's going to be a different kind of discussion, because there's something about Boston that teams aren't prepared for, and it's working. And they could get some healthier players back soon. Buzz has that Tristan Casas may not be too far off, right? And there's plenty of, exciting energy around what they're doing, both in and away from Fenway. So, yes, I hear you, and I've heard you all season, that Boston doesn't seem like somebody who can have staying power in the playoff race. And with such a crowded race developing, I get that. I just can't count them out myself. I cannot say that they seem on a downward trend. They seem, instead, to be quite capable. So we'll see if they prove that when they go 3 games with Miami, 3 with the Yankees, and then 3 with Oakland. I don't know about you, Dan, but listening to that breakdown, I do think we hear a riser in there. A riser for next week, because, I mean, they could easily take down Miami and Oakland. They just need one against New York to really look like they belong. And I bet they
we'll
do,
see.
because they won their last series with the Yankees, buddy. They did.
They
Which is
did.
why.
And the Yankees are struggling right now. So it's a good point, Warren.
It's a really good point. This could be a good week for Boston. I wonder. Too low, Dan. Too low. Maybe. We'll find out. Number 12 buzzes through my brain all of a sudden. Number 12. And I wonder what team will take its position this week.
Oh, man. Number 12. Are we
There's
not at number 13, Warren?
Oh, goodness, you're totally right. And I'll tell you why, guys. I jumped the gun so fast, I threw this name into my list and moved on.
You're just like, get out of here. Done.
Get out of here. I'm done. I don't want to talk about you guys, but I should want to. One of your teams again, Dan. I don't mean to be shooting at you so aggressively, but I suppose I'm on a hot streak. It is the Kansas City Royals. Kansas City Royals was another 5-5 team this week. They are overall now 47-39, so still solidly in the American League playoff realm. Don't worry too much. They've just had a couple of strange weeks, these Royals have, but they may be climbing out of it. They did get swept by Texas, which was a shocker for all of us who have been paying attention this season. But then they rebounded with 2 wins against Miami and 3 in a shocking 4-game, 3-1 series victory against the Cleveland Guardians. Yes, those Cleveland Guardians, the leaders of the division, and my pick to win it. So Dan and I had some fun tete-a-tete over the text messages while we followed that series. This is a super strong Kansas City team. We don't need me to say, Salvador Perez can crush and Bobby Witt Jr. can do whatever he wants. And Hunter Renfroe does some surprising swinging from time to time. And guys like, Adam Frazier can play some good role play for this team, but so can good old Sasquatch, Pasquantino, and, AJ Melendez. Like, it's just, there's a lot to like. And of course, from the pitching side of it, I bet Texas still wishes they still had Cole Reagans. Woof. And Seth Lugo pitching so well. So much to like about Kansas City. They may be at number 13, the unlucky number this week, but they have enough luck to get them through the American League panel, we think, and we feel, and I'm sure you'll still agree, Dan.
Yeah, the Texas series was a bit out of character and pretty unfortunate, but they definitely rebounded the rest of the way. And at this point, Warren, the pitching side of things are great. I think the Royals, if anything, I think they need a power outfielder, dude. Maybe not necessarily a power outfielder, but a good on-base outfielder, like a Tommy Pham type would be perfect for this team. So I could definitely see them trying to make a move at the deadline to help their push and solidly close out this division.
If we don't get Mark Canha, the Royals feel like a team that would, because they've had a lot of eyes on them, on him in Detroit, right? While playing them a lot, right? So I don't know. That is the kind of player I'd get, a utility player, one with a good contact bat, and one that you probably don't have to give too much away for. So it could very well be on the writing on the wall. Good call. But a great Kansas City team that doesn't need a whole lot at this point. So just to continue to play as positively and consistently as they can. Now, do you want to take number 12, Dan?
Yeah, I'll take number 12 here, and love to have this team outside the top 10. Any chance I can, Warren, you know it. It's going to have to be the Los Angeles Dodgers. Yeah.
What is wrong with you? You swerved
right.
me again. Dang you, Dan Harrow.
Yeah, man. Not even the best team in LA. We saw the Dodgers open the week against the Angels, and they split the series. So the questions abound. And, the Dodgers did then have a series against the Chicago White Sox. That was a sweep. I don't think we'd expect anything less. But then that series against the Giants, Warren, they only won 1 out of the 3. So all in all, a 5-3 week for the Dodgers. Not bad, but definitely weaker than what we've come to expect. And 3 losses to 3 teams with losing records, one of which in their own division. I mean, this is a lack of consistency we're starting to see slowly wreaking out. The Dodgers have really done a pretty good job, all things considered, with guys like Stone and Paxton and the one land and Knack stepping up in the rotation to help make things really work. But recently, Kershaw's still not back. Yoshi went down. Walker Bueller is still struggling. And now Mookie went out, Warren.
Yeah.
And that almost was like the straw that broke the camel's back, because all of a sudden, all these overpowering wins became closer wins. And some of the close
Mhm.
wins became close losses. And the one thing I will say is, since Mookie went down, Shohei went on a 10-game hit streak. I mean, he's been hotter than ever, almost making up for it or trying to.
That's what he does. He
But
tries to make up for stuff. We watched it in Los Angeles on the other team. So
there you go.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he definitely is doing everything he can to, but it just seems like it's the Dodgers are trying a little bit too hard, and the kind of like we saw from the Yankees this past week, the lower ends of the lineup and their depth are not stepping up to the levels we expected. So the Dodgers take a step back this week, and we got to see guys get healthy and then kind of rebound to get back to where we know they can be.
So just like we said, high risk, high reward for the Yankees, it's the same story for Los Angeles. And in our preseason discussion, we went, what if all these veteran guys that they brought in to, shore up chances of being great in many people's minds, right? What if they just don't perform or they get hurt? Do they have a farm? No. Do they have like a ton of, I don't know. Like they might be running out of ways to improvise around things, and they're just a key injury away from derailing their own destiny, and far sooner than expected. I mean, that's a storyline that is brewing. So, way to point that out. And the dangers are super strong. Like they really are there, and it doesn't take much for a team like Philadelphia to embarrass you if you're not truly ready to face someone of that quality. So is Los Angeles going to find themselves there? Probably not in the long term, if I'm being honest. We still think enough talent exists on this team to, make it to the dance in October and then march their way through at least a round or two. And a likely, in my mind, World Series appearance. Only Philadelphia seems stronger in that. But anyway, I digress. The point is, this is a very strong team on paper with plenty of holes starting to develop in reality. So, will they punch too many holes into their roster and find themselves unable to hold water? It really could happen. We'll have to see if they could dodger that. See what I did there? Dodger that? Oh, man.
Nice.
Somebody pay me. I need money. I'm so poor. Good, Dan. Way to catch me again. That's 3. You've had 3 really good curveballs on me tonight. I have to say, I didn't expect.
Keep you on your toes, dude.
Dude, my toes are hurting. Can I please get off them?
No.
What if I give you tribute? Okay, I've got tribute for you. What if I throw the Atlanta Braves outside the top 10?
Yes, good tribute.
Yes, tasty tribute. Yes. Dan, the Atlanta Braves had a 5-5 week and treaded water pretty obviously. They did win 2 of 3 against the Yankees, who've been struggling. Great series to watch on TV. St. Louis actually took 2 of 3 from Atlanta, further emphasizing how far the Cardinals have come recently. And then they drop a game to the Braves to the White Sox, who came to town just to hang out for a while. And then finally Pittsburgh was their bounce back. They did win 2 of 3 against Pittsburgh to end their week, though they did end that series on a loss to miss the sweep. So Atlanta, of course, well documented to be one of your greatest rivals. You don't necessarily want to make them sound good. But this is a team that pieces together its offense in similar ways that we're seeing to some of the other mega powers out there who have their one big bat, Ozuna, being super consistent, and everybody else around them kind of taking turns being aight. And that's kind of the storyline for Atlanta while they still wait for health to work out. And maybe it won't. These trades need to happen if they're going to get used to their new team in time to power back in these National League playoff contending rankings. What do you feel, Dan? How do you feel about Atlanta?
Yeah, I think Atlanta should be a little scared right now.
Yeah.
5-5 week where they have potential for a lot more. That game against Chicago, no excuse that no one could get a run in that game, or no excuse. And at this point, they have a real problem with slugging. Like you mentioned Ozuna, and they were doing really well on slugging at the start of the year, but they've definitely fallen back down to earth. At this point, the only team with less runs scored among the top 8 NL teams is St. Louis. So that's pretty jarring for an Atlanta team that started off as hot as they did. And I like
Yeah.
you remember Jared Kelenic getting to this team and how they knew they needed outfield help, but obviously the other injuries they've had there. And Adam Duvall is not working more. And like enough times gone by, it's not working. At this point, Atlanta, especially with Harris being out too, they could use 2 starting outfielders. So it's even
Ooh.
more pressure on them to be aggressive for that. That is the weak point of this roster. There's more to it than that, of course. But I don't know. The more we look at it, the more I feel like, man, when Strider went down and Acuna and all the injuries they've dealt with, like, is this one of those years for a strong team like Atlanta where they have the pieces, but it just doesn't all line up? The guys aren't healthy at the right time, and it just
Mhm.
doesn't materialize. Because I'm getting that feeling more and more. We know Atlanta's been there, done that. We know they have all these strong pieces, but it just feels like this isn't their year, Warren.
Yeah, well, you could very well be right that maybe they just cut their losses. Maybe they don't invest more of a farm that I'm going to expect doesn't have a ton in it anyway, really. I haven't pulled up the top 100 prospects list to double check that, but something tells me they've already done so much to build as strong a team as they could when the season started that now that everybody's starting to fall, do they really have the capital to fill up these voids? And it's sounding like maybe they do want to take pause, think about it, and wonder how much more do we want to dump into a year that is basically Murphy's Law, right at the moment. Losing your best pitcher, losing your best outfielder, not getting a lot of the return from the investments you have put in. I mean, yeah, maybe this can be the day or the year where they take a deep breath, step away, and move on and come back next year a little bit stronger, maybe. But I don't know, Dan. The truth is that none of us know. There's so much baseball left to be played that you have to expect this team to be able to hold enough water that they could make it into the playoffs and where anything can happen. But everybody's going to be exhausted and overworked and totally burned out and, maybe even see a really early exit. That could be what we're brewing to. But the Braves need to make moves somehow, some way. And until they do, we're calling them on thin ice for sure. They've got to figure out some ideas of solutions and start moving. Now, number 10, Dan. Top 10 list. We are so close already to the end of our show, and really good teams are left. Who do you got to start off this week's top 10?
Yeah, so you're right. A lot of good teams left, but I'm happy, Warren, to have this team in the top 10. It's going to be the New York Mets at the number
Aw,
10 spot.
keeping yourself humble, huh? Not letting them get all the way to the tippy top this week.
Yeah, man, they lost a few games this week. We're not going to get too crazy, but the Mets have had a couple weeks at the top of the rankings, and staying in the top 10 is exactly what they need to do to stay close to 500. They went 5-3 this week. They took 2 out of 3 over the Cubs. We mentioned earlier they swept the Yankees in a Subway Series at Citi Field, and
Mm-hmm.
they took 1 out of 3 over Houston, just the first of that 3-game series. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you look at record and average and all the offensive stats, Ward, the Mets were pretty much by far the best offensive team in the month of June. And in addition to that, they have one of the easiest schedules in all of baseball going forward. They are
Ooh.
thirders, easiest in the league, the first most easiest in the National League. So this all pairs really well with the Mets going down the rest of the way. A couple things take away from another good week and this month overall. Mark Vientos has totally won the starting third baseman job. Our kind of run at the start of June coincided with him taking over that position. Also, around that time, Francisco Alvarez came back. His catcher's ERA is like sub 3. It's a full 2 runs better than any other catcher that is or was on the team, Warren. Like
Wow.
it can't be overstated the offensive and defensive impact he's had and the confidence he's brought to the hitters, to the pitchers. I mean, it's unreal. It really is. He just had his first 0 for day in the last game against Houston, ending a 10-game hit streak that he was on. Like unreal production that he was off of. This is all happening. West Starling Marte, one of the team's hottest hitters, has been on the IL resting his knee. Everybody else has done great in his stead. So it's just the offense has just exploded, Warren. Everybody's breaking out. Let me tell you a couple of the names. Let me give you a couple of the starting pitchers that the Mets have beat over the last 10 days, Warren. And not just beat, blown up, knocked them out before they've got to 7 innings pitched. Each of them, Shoto Imanaga, Dylan Cease, Garrett Cole, John Gray, Renel Blanco, aces on all of these teams, and the Mets are knocking them aside like nothing. And believe me, I'm just waiting for this to stop. I'm waiting for the momentum to run out, for something to give. But they're hot right now, Warren, and I know it will stop. But the longer they can keep this up, the more they can really firmly implant themselves into a wild card spot so that they're the team being chased and not chasing the rest of the way.
Oh, what a beautiful series of sound bites you presented to us about your team there, Dan. Amazing. I can hear the excitement in your voice. You're having a good time watching your team. And I'm
I
not
know.
going to say, yeah, exactly. I'm not going to say anything. I think you should enjoy it. Enjoy your momentum.
Thanks,
May
man.
it keep you hot for a little while longer, because I'd love to see both our teams make the playoffs the first year we talk about it. But who knows? Anything can happen and none of that can happen. But
Yeah.
I do like hearing you enjoy your baseball team. That is super cool. Enjoy your top 10 spot and your third, upper echelon position, I would say, in a row for the show.
Yeah.
And it was a great June for these Mets. I would like to slide in a team that went maybe 6-3 here, 6 wins, 3 losses, not necessarily a world beater, but a team that had a good week and you want to applaud it. So I have the perfect team in mind, and another team I have to tip my cap to because they took 2 of 3 from my Seattle Mariners. How about the Tampa Bay Rays, who finally look like a team that like winning baseball games, that have that as part of their identity. Oh, it was rough watching us kind of flounder against the offense or the pitching for this team, because it's not the most impressive staff we've faced this year. And, lo and behold, more whiffs from the Mariners. But the offense sparked in me some memories, right? We saw some Arozarena getting down. One of the lows or lows got down, right? And the power's starting to wake up a little bit. I'm not going to say this team is going to start racing past some of the stronger crushers in the league, but Isaac Paredes does his part. And this is a quality team when they put it all together. And we've seen a lot of them not consistently doing that this year. This week, they just were able to win all 3 of their series. 2 against Pittsburgh, taken out of 3. I did say they won 2 out of 3 against Seattle, and then a victory over Washington as well. The Nationals going down. So great week for Tampa, all things considered. Do you think they can keep it going? They do sit at 42-42. So that is the question right now. They can tip either way.
Yeah, I think their next set of series are a bit tougher than the last few, but if the guys who have been hot stay hot, like Randy really came alive in June and after being non-existent for the start of the year. So if he can maintain that, Yandy Diaz had a nice little 19-game hit streak. Like if he can keep that going, I mean, I will say this team has performed a little better than I think what we expected, Warren, coming into the year. So it's pretty admirable to see them at 500 right at the midpoint. Where they'll be the rest of the way, I still see them falling out of the playoff race. I don't see them staying right in there, but who knows? They've surprised us pretty consistently. So I'm not going to make any solid predictions on the Rays because I feel like it'll just be wrong. They're gonna throw some curveballs the rest of the way.
They're definitely one of the most interesting teams in the league, who are really effectively straddling the line between, being inferior on paper and with the eye test and actually being, capable of taking out better teams. So, yeah, maybe we got to stop pretending like we know they're going to lose eventually. But I mean, It's a very stacked American League race starting to come together then. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to really know what they're about once and for all. But kudos to them for really flying under the radar and being a little bit of everything and keeping everybody guessing. You got to give the Rays credit for that for sure. And number 8, a lucky number to some, maybe just to me. I love the number 8. I don't know why. But for you, Dan, is it lucky enough to pick maybe the best team of them all quietly? Maybe this will be the World Series winner right here that you're just sliding across the table at us.
Oh, for me, dude, right here, we got to put the Milwaukee Brewers
Ooh,
in this spot. Kind of an
okay.
interesting week for Milwaukee. They went 6-4, so it's pretty good, but they started it off by only taking 1 out of 4 against San Diego. So they lost the first 3 before winning the finale. But then they turned it around and they swept through the Texas Rangers, won 3 in a row there, and then
Bam.
took 2 out of 3 against Chicago. So they opened the week with a 3-game losing streak. Then they won 5 in a row, then a loss and a win. Kind of all over the place. Mostly just got outslugged in San Diego from the looks of it. But the offense was much better in Texas and Chicago. And that's kind of like the offense in Milwaukee that we've been used to seeing. So I think that's kind of telling us the story that they can probably slug with any of the good teams in the National League, but against those kind of upper echelon teams, I think they're just a little bit outmatched. And, Contreras has been like definitely worthy of an all-star as we continues to be great in most of these games. He's igniting that offensive production. And man, every time I see a game with him in it, Warren, I'm just so happy he's not still on the Braves. I'm so happy that he's not still with them and he's in Milwaukee. That's fine.
Yeah, he can make that franchise infinitely better. And he's one of my favorite players this year for sure. Super duper enjoying watching him play baseball and running the offense almost at will and at his whim. And an all-star catcher, most definitely. We talked about how we both voted him in our opinion, in our all-star ballot breakdown. But this team is so much more than just him. And I know we talk about it week in and week out. I guess what the real dangers are the pitching. Can the pitching sustain them through the rest of this and into the postseason where pitching matters above all so that you can miss those bats that are coming in as motivated and hot as possible? And I can see why writing might be on the wall that they might not have enough. But if they maybe do just even 1 or 2 things to shore up the arms, especially at this point, because the offense shouldn't need it too much, this team can suddenly look like the closest thing to a contender outside of Philadelphia or Los Angeles. But even then, you've done a good job of convincing me that there's holes in the Dodgers fabric. So this is cool stuff, but Milwaukee could be one of those teams tough enough to surge past it. I mean, we've waited for them to dip and they just can't. They just can't. So if the bats stay hot, maybe they'll continue to overcome some pretty noticeable pitching-based obstacles. Number 7, lucky number 7 for everybody else. 8 was my lucky number. Number 7, we all know this to be the jackpot. Is this the team that's going to hit the jackpot and be our World Series champions? I don't know, but they're the last team I need to tip my cap to, because they're the 3rd team that beat the Seattle Mariners in a series this week. How about Minnesota? The Twins at number 7. And they have...
Wow. I would have had them higher than that, Warren.
Oh, would you have? Sorry.
I think so.
But technically, they're pretty much on par with my Mariners, who sit back at number 25 or something fugly like that. It's technically not a curse word, guys. They went 2-1 against Oakland, 2-1 against Arizona, and 2-1 against Seattle. Did Minnesota winning all 3 of their series too. So sliding them around here seems to make a lot of sense when I just got done chalking up one for Tampa Bay. They do prepare to take on Detroit, Houston, and the White Sox this week, so more heat could be coming from Minnesota, and they're just hitting a good part of their schedule now where they can generally beat these teams pretty straightforward. They are 47-37. They look like they are ready to make themselves a solid 6th best team in the American League and push hard for that playoff spot that a lot of teams have their eye on. And Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, Willie Castro. There's Carlos Correa, of course. Can't forget about him. Max Kepler. Like, there's guys getting it done, and I watch these bats swing, and even their young guys seem to make contact, fairly reliably. I don't want to face Minnesota in a 7-game series. Do you? Tell me about it.
No way, man. They have really good defense too, which is always kind of intimidating to me to play against a team where you a normal hit just gets swallowed up by a team like this. And yeah, I think we keep waiting for them to fall off, and it's just not happening. I think they had a couple easier teams this week they took advantage of, but their schedule doesn't get a lot tougher with the few teams they're facing in the next 10 days, Warren. So I think this team might stand to get even hotter. We've seen them go on hot streaks before, as long as they can stay relatively healthy. Minnesota is still definitely something to be trifled with.
Oh yeah, look to them to run right past a lot of the competition this week. I expect them to be somewhere in the green when we talk about them in 10 days again. Which, guys, just for fun, that's a good reason for me to say prepare for record our next show, perhaps around the 11th of July. The 11th of July. Stay tuned for more content. We're still going to keep doing these 10-game clips. They give us a little bit more to talk about, and I hope you're enjoying it. Anyway. Dan, number 6. We are finally to our risers. Only 6 teams left to discuss this week. These are the best of the best of the best. Sir, who kicks it off?
Yeah, so here we go into the risers. It's got to be starting things off with the Cleveland Guardians for me, Warren.
Ooh.
Really good week. Kind of a couple different stories from their series, though. A win, a loss, and a sweep. So they swept through Toronto 3-0. Very good showing there. Took 2 out of 3 against Baltimore, and then just 1 out of 3 against Kansas City. So the week started off strong with a 5-game win streak, and it kind of trailed off a little bit there. So a couple things worth noting. Currently, the Guardians are 26-9 at home. Very impressive home record, one of the best in the entire league, and a very impressive 23-12 against teams under 500. We've seen a lot of the stronger teams struggle against some of those. So really good to see that. And then about all the normal guys like J-Ram and Quan and Naylor, Warren. But the 2 main things that stand out to me are the bullpen, obviously. They're leading the majors currently with a 2.34 ERA. And the next closest in the league is the Dodgers at 3.02. So a huge margin.
Yeah.
And then the second thing, in addition to those bats we mentioned, is David Fry.
Warren. Yeah.
I mean,
like
huge part.
Yeah.
Huge part of this team, right? That none of us had taken into account before the start of the year and is contributing in ways we couldn't imagine. That's just taking Cleveland to the next level.
Absolutely. To a lesser extent, Will Brennan is in my mind for that too. Will Brennan's been doing a lot for them. Yeah, there's something in Cleveland's water right now that tastes so sweet. They're just playing really good team ball. Everybody knows their role, and the bullpen is legit. And everybody gets stoked to see Emmanuel Clase take the mound because you can book it in and out of the game. It is amazing. So, I don't need to continue to repeat how awesome I think Cleveland is. They just feel like one of those uncrowned playoff teams waiting for their, enough wins to take the division. Not to say Minnesota or Kansas City can't catch them. It's just Cleveland looks like the team most understanding of who they are and are winning the games that show it. So I don't really need to repeat because I think I was on this bandwagon a long time ago and have been almost the entire series. Or season, excuse me. So kudos to more Cleveland success. I expect it. Yes, definitely. I didn't expect this next team to be our 5th best team, but when I look at everybody who's left on the field, regrettably, this is the team that I think needed to go next. They did have 4 losses compared to the rest of the teams on the list who have fewer. And at 6-4, I'm calling out the Philadelphia Phillies. They did win 2 of 3 against Arizona, 2 of 3 against Detroit, but then split a weird one against Miami. So didn't see that coming, but they still sit at 55-29. 55-29 is enough to be among the top teams in the entire league. So we're not worried about them too much. They clearly have something in their mojo. They've got Brandon Marsh playing well and getting an all-star nod, or at least consideration. You've got Alec Boehm playing above his level. Though Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper are injured, and that is awfully regrettable, they still win their baseball games this week at enough of a clip to get our respect. Maybe the split with Miami is a sign of some concerning things to come and blowback from these injuries. I just think Philadelphia is strong enough to weather them still. So that's where I stand. How do you feel about another one of your National League East rivals? And I believe the last we'll discuss today, of course, the Philadelphia Phillies.
And we always knew it would be Atlanta and Philly, like, gunning it out for the top of the NL East. But dude, their bats, their rotation, I mean, they have some of the best in baseball on both sides. At this point, the rotation has been so good. It's allowed them to just not overexert the bullpen, to let everyone not lock down their roles. I mean, the closest thing to a shakeup they had was when Taiwan Walker got hurt in April, and they used Spencer Turnbull to fill in for him. And he did so well when Walker came back and they stuck Turnbull back into the bullpen. He put up a 1.67 ERA out of the
Wow.
bullpen, to the point that now Taiwan Walker is still not hurt, but a little bit shaky. The Phillies are comfortable just letting Walker rest, let him work on his splitter, let him just take a couple of starts off, and they'll just pull Turnbull out of the bullpen and throw him back in the rotation, and oh, it'll be fine. He'll allow 2 runs a game. I mean, of spoils of riches, Warren. It just never ends. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, and obviously, yes, the Phillies are a great team, but you mentioned Harper and Schwarber are both on the IL now for this team. Harper, unfortunately, might miss another All-Star game due to
Ugh.
this injury in a Phillies uniform. That's the thing I wanted to bring up, Warren. I've seen a lot of Harper from when he was with the Nationals before going to the Phillies. Since he's been with Philadelphia, injuries have been a huge part of his game. I mean, consistently every single year, and it was
Mm.
not like that in Washington. And as Bryce starts to get a little bit older, really kind of makes me worry. Like, are they going to be able to get full seasons out of him going forward? Is this the point where we just have to expect an injury as part of his season? Like, this isn't the old Bryce Harper we're used to, who plays 162 games.
Well, I mean, that does happen to great stars all over the league, and it doesn't always take that long into their career to do it. And look at Mike Trout, another great example of a fantastic player who is getting hurt a lot and regularly. And, Byron Buxton, he's not that old. You know the point. Like, there are great players who don't get to have the full extent of their career all the time because of nagging injuries, repetitive injuries, or just generally being labeled as injury prone. So you have to take it into account. Show them the Carfax, right? If you guys know that commercial, play teams will be looking at the track record and going, well, it seems as if there's a pattern here, and we'll have to see what if that will matter at all in a Bryce Harper contract year. I will be curious to remind myself how long he still remains with this Phillies team. He does have a superstar level contract, no doubt, but I would expect it to be something on everybody's radar, and we'll hope the trend doesn't continue if we want him to have a successful career. Depending on your opinion of Bryce Harper, you might want him to continue to get hurt a lot and never reach the upper echelon of player caliber again. But to each their own. I mean, a lot of people I talk to don't like Bryce Harper in Las Vegas. That's where he's from. I don't know why. And then a lot of people I talk to are like, he's from Vegas, so of course I love him. I don't really care that much. I just like good baseball. And he's pretty good at baseball. So hopefully he stays healthy, is my vote.
Well, he's signed for the next, it looks like 7 years. So hopefully it's not an ongoing issue.
Yeah, hopefully that's the case, because that is a Mike Trout level albatross if that's the case.
Yeah, his
Not
age
that
38 season. So
Yeah. See, that's right. Almost to the 40s by the time it wraps, and that's kind of a big deal.
yeah.
We'll hope he's not turning into the same kind of glass cannon that Mike has been, Trout that is, for the last couple of years, but it does seem to be a pattern, and I'm gonna quit trashing Mike Trout out of turn. Dan, I believe at this stage then, with the next pick to be considered, that I would like to submit that it's your choice. 4 teams left, Dan. Hurry up.
Yeah, man. Well, I think right here, pretty happy to have him here. I gotta say, it's gonna be the St. Louis Cardinals. Over 500 baseball, Warren. 3 games over 500. They had a
Mm-hmm.
6-3 week, and things are finally starting to go the way we thought. Well, I thought that they would.
Yeah,
They
you did.
started the week off with a sweep of the San Francisco Giants, took all 3 in that series. They took 2 out of 3 over the Atlanta Braves. Pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then 1 out of 4 against Cincinnati. Kind of fell on their face there a little bit at the end of the week. But something really cool to take away from this, Warren, because we talked a lot about the bats and some of the starting pitchers on this team. Ryan Helsley now has a club record 28 consecutive saves. And
Wow.
the crazy thing is he's had just 1 inning out of the bullpen where he's been pressured for a run. Everything else he's keeping completely under control, and they don't send him out there for more than 1 inning at a time. They don't ask for more than 3 outs. So they're just managing him the right way for a nice long run through the rest of the year. So it's good to see the back of the bullpen and the closer position as some solidity to it for the St. Louis team. But yeah, Warren, they're on the up. They got a relatively easy schedule the rest of the way. I think that they might be able to make a real run at this division title.
I don't know why not. You will have me definitely singing your praises. I feel that this is a team that can climb into the National League playoff race and remain there. I'm excited for that outcome, and I think the audience at Busch Stadium out in St. Louis is catching the fever of a new era of St. Louis baseball, and I love seeing the energy. I think it's really exciting stuff, and sweeping the Giants, who pretend and needed to be, put in their place, and getting 2 of 3 from Atlanta, taking advantage of a reeling contender. Awesome work. I mean, sure, the blemish against Cincinnati is, kind of surprising, but Cincinnati is also doing their best to beat teams that they view they're looking up to. So you got to expect to not win at all. But St. Louis is winning well, and at 43-40, I'm just excited to see the momentum keep going. They do have 3 against Pittsburgh. They have 4 against Washington. And then they have one of those weird 2 sets against the Royals, which should be a fun matchup of central cross-league potential playoff contenders. So have some fun with that. Kind of a light schedule for St. Louis this week. We could be talking about them and singing some more praises of theirs in another 10 days. And I wouldn't be surprised. To our top 3 then, Dan. I've been noticing last couple conversations, dude, you've been really hugging that St. Louis Padres hat of yours. I'm not sure what's got you turning that on, but I do want to put the Padres here because with a record of this week 8-2, they are the only team with 2 losses left on the board from this past week. And they did win 3 of 4 against Milwaukee. They swept Washington, reminding everybody how the Nationals have had a tough time. And then 2 out of 3 victories came at the hands of Boston. So a great week for the Padres. Really, really strong. And you got to think they're finally putting it together. Machado's getting to his all-star numbers, and Tatis is getting to his all-star numbers, and Arias is the glue guy in the middle, making it all make sense. And we've seen some of the arms who've kind of run hot and cold running a little hotter. I mean, they still give up their share of runs, but they also create their share of them. The Padres came out on the right end enough this week to be in our top 3. What do you think, Dan? Is this sustainable?
I tell you what, man, I've been real impressed by the way that bats have been going off, and not just one guy. I mean, Tatis is on the IL right now, and he was just starting to really break out of his little cold streak. So he was going
Mm-hmm.
really well before that. So that's kind of a bummer. But amongst all this, the rest of the bats have been great. You already mentioned all of them. It's worth noting, Warren, that the Nats are they are so chippy. The Nationals have been fighting with everybody. They mess around with the Dodgers and the Giants already this year. I'm looking forward to the Mets couple series against them, but they got super chippy against the Padres in that series. The Padres swept to the point where they disrespected, again, Dirks and Profar by walking Luis Ariz ahead of him, loaded the bases for Profar, the hottest hitter on the Padres, who immediately hit a grand slam. Like, they are just poking the bear, and the Padres are like, go ahead, poke it up. I mean, the next day they had a whole little thing happen with Profar after winning the game before. The Nats took
Oh
exception
man.
to that. Mackenzie Gore threw at Profar. It might not have been an
Oh.
intentional, might have been, who knows. Their manager gets ejected, something he's been doing a lot of, Warren. Every time Mike Schilt goes out there, he is asking, like, please eject me so that my team gets excited. And yeah, they responded. Machado came up in the next inning and hit a home run right away. So they are just living off of the vibes right now. That was a mistake messing with them in that series because they swept Washington. They carried that momentum into that Boston series, and they're hot right now. Campusano, one of their hottest hitters, went down, and Higashioka came up. He's actually stepped in and done really well in place where he struggled all year before this. So a little bit more confidence in the starting role. So yeah, I think this is sustainable. I'm really happy to see the Padres kicking off the way they have. And I think they're going to chase down LA, Warren. They already got the Dodgers in their sights. They're gunning for it.
Whoa! Could there actually be a surprise winner of the National League West after all? Not the Diamondbacks, but the Padres? Dan's believing all of a sudden. That's exciting. We'll see if the momentum keeps going.
Yeah.
But I wish good things for Campusano. Hurry back, because he was having a great year of showing out and showing he belongs with his teammates for this squad. All right, my friend, we are down to our final two teams. It's time to take it home in style. A very interesting pair too. Both American League West teams. I better go light some candles, I think. So let's see.
Yeah, teams are getting hot in that division, Warren. Not good news for Seattle being as low as they were, but you're going to have to talk about one of these teams. I know you have a lot to say about both of them, and you'll get your chance. So I think I am going to take the opportunity here at number 2 to talk about the Los Angeles Angels, leaving your preferred team for you, Warren. So the Angels went 7-1 this week, Warren. They started off by splitting that series against the Dodgers 1-1 before going to Oakland and taking 3 in a row, sweeping through the A's. And then they won another 3 against Detroit before dropping the last of a 4-game series. So that's actually 7-2, not 7-1. Now that I do the math quickly in my head, but that's okay. The point is that the Angels had a really good week, really took it to LA in a way that we didn't think that they would. And the Oakland series was expected. I wouldn't be surprised to see Oakland win a game out of that. The Angels were gutsy though and won all of them. And it's been really encouraging, Warren. We've talked a lot about the culture and about Ron Washington and all this sort of stuff. I don't know if you saw, but Ron Washington used the halfway point of the season to do a media presser and basically talk about how the team is young and he understands that the fans are frustrated because they have had a pretty good teams the last few years, Otani with and without. And they want to see the wins. They want to see some stuff come into fruition, especially with the younger players they've had in their system that Washington's been working with. And he was basically like, listen, we're doing everything that we can be doing. All of the batsmen are trying to be more efficient. Our pitchers are getting better. We're making small ball moves. We're trying to learn the game and win cohesively as a team. And, the first thing that comes with that is the small individual numbers and working together. And then next comes the wins. So you kind of see those smaller numbers coming together. And I think Ron Washington is trying to tell everybody, like, hey, take a second. Like, I know everybody wants to win now, but things are going well and we shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves. The one bad news that kind of came out of this, though, Warren, at this kind of exciting week is that Pat Sandoval is done for this year and
Yeah.
probably next year too, which means he'll have just 1 year under contract with the Angels before he's a free agent. So we'll still
Yeah.
yet to see what this team will look like after the deadline if they move on for some older pieces. But that was kind of encouraging for me, Warren, after a strong week. And then hearing those comments from Ron Washington, I was like, okay, maybe we need to give the Angels a little more time.
Interesting stuff. What a thing to say. Give the Angels a little bit more time at this stage of the season when they are, after all, looking at a record of, way too many under 500 to be contenders for a playoff run. But why sell all these folks off? It's true. Why split it all up? Why not find some mojo and build a different identity for this team? And that's definitely what Ron Washington's been working on all the way up to this point. Guys like Willie Calhoun and Kevin Pillar. He tried Nico Goodrum for a minute before moving on from that. Point is like all this new blood that was injected suddenly into the lineup and creating some buzz and some ruffling of feathers and changing of hierarchy. Like, that's good. You're looking for the right recipe, and this week they found it. Had a great week. Certainly not the winningest team overall, darn it, but played really well. And again, the culture change comes with highs and lows, and this one's definitely a high. And I think Ron Washington did a great thing by making the mid-season point a time to check in with the fans and temper expectations and help guide understanding and talk about what this team can be. I mean, that's as good a move as anything. It's certainly more than Phil Nevin ever did. So I'm totally cool with this, and a great week and a great success story. Kudos to the Angels, 7-2, as my sweetheart quietly starts to fall asleep. One last team left to talk about. Dan left them for me. I think you're going to understand pretty quick, those who are keeping at home, why he did that. This team, of course, is 7-1 after the week they had. Incredible play, real hot, real fiery, out of this world, you could say. They did win, in this order, a sweep against the Baltimore Orioles, a 2-game sweep against Colorado, and 2-1 was the record against the Mets, winning everything and only dropping the one game to the Metropolitans. This team has a ton of power in their lineup at all times with guys like Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, and, other dudes who hit the ball really well. They also have Jose Altuve, who's on the final ballot for your starting second baseman for the All-Star game. They have pitching that's re-strengthening themselves, and none of it matters. The number one team of the week, fire truck the Astros, Dan.
Yeah.
What? You wanted that bad. But the truth is, all the candles I lit for 4 or 5 weeks before taking this past week off to toot my Seattle horn didn't do anything. I've done nothing to curtail the juju, because now Seattle's 10-game lead since the last time we spoke to you all in a full-fledged episode has dwindled to the 3.5 I tried to correct you away from just a few days ago, Dan. Gosh darn it. I can't tell you how expected this was, yet how utterly frustrating it is to have to remind everybody, fire truck the Astros. I mean, I deserve to leave our show in this listless state, because I did my best to warn everyone, and it's still coming to pass. And my Seattle Mariners look like their offense couldn't possibly outrun the Houston Astros right now. So, oh boy, here comes the fun part. The chase is on, and it is breathing right down our necks, are those Astros. So I wonder what you have to say about them before we call it a day, Dan.
Man, through their last 10 games, the Astros are 9-1. And yeah, they're just hot, Warren. And I could tell you from the Mets' perspective, like, we were in those 2 games that we lost. That game 3 was tied in the 9th and won the extras. And that game 2, the Mets had the lead for a while before relinquishing it. So it really was the offense. The Mets were able to take advantage of all of their pitchers for the most part. The one thing I will say, Warren, is the third game against the Mets, the Houston, we talked about it. They've been doing this. They've been doing bullpen days because they're still struggling on the pitching side of things. JP France, by the way, is done for the year to hurt them even more on that side of things. But they did a bullpen day for the third start against the Mets, Warren. Their bullpen no-hit the Mets for the first 6 innings. So I don't even know if they're all that concerned about being down a starter, because their bullpen has performed pretty admirably to the point where they're really being more of a bridge, so their closers can get them a couple outs even if they give up a run or two by being that much ahead. So yeah, I get it, man. I'm stressed right there with you. That offense is potent. All I can say is it's gonna cool off. It's gonna cool off. There's no way they can keep this up the rest of the way. Right? There's no way.
Dan, I just had a terrible premonition.
Oh,
God. Garrett Crochet. in an Astros uniform.
Oh no! Don't even say
Oh
that,
my
dude.
God. It hurts so bad.
Don't even say that.
God, I hope it's Eric Fetty, but even that would be bad. Oh,
Maybe they'll get like
man.
Luis Severino or something.
Oh, sure. From you? Why? Why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense, and you know it. Oh, it hurts. I've got the worst headache all of a sudden from that exact image. Guys, the Astros are here. They're not coming. They're here. Ugh. Let's see what happens after the next 10 games of the season elapses. We're going to be talking major trade deadline stuff. Hopefully something will have moved in 10 days. By the time the 11th rolls around, we record our next show. Cue up the go home music, Dan, because it's time for me to go take some Advil and try to forget about that because I got shudders. Let us know down in the comments if at number 30 the Chicago Cubs are in danger of falling off your playoff contending list too. Do you have any solutions? Put that in the comments because I bet they need them. Let us know down in the comments if at number 20 Dan's disrespected the Baltimore Orioles to put them in the 20 spot twice in this series. The show is driving you nuts because it's driving me nuts. Stop the disrespect, Dan. Let me know in the comments below if at number 15 San Francisco got off easy. I think they did. I don't think this team's a top team in Major League Baseball, but we knew that already. Dan still needs convincing, but hopefully not much more. Let us know in the comments below if at number 10, Dan was still kind to his Mets after maybe not as perfect of a week as the previous two, but hey, you're still playing great. I love the optimism. Go, buddy. Enjoy your momentum. Let us know in the comments below if we were stupid for putting Philadelphia in the top 5 and not the top 3, top 2, or top 1. And finally, let us know in the comments below what terrible Astro feelings you might have. I'd appreciate that. Let me know how much you hate the Astros in the comments below. Fire truck the Astros, guys. Fire truck them. Okay, Dan, anything for our audience before we wish them a safe trip around the bases?
Yeah, we got an all-star ballot out there. Make sure you tune in, check that out, and we will have a trade deadline breakdown at some point. As soon as something starts happening, we'll be here to talk about it. Hopefully it's soon.
No, we'll both try to talk about which players we'd like to see in our various blues, yellows, oranges, teals, whatever colors we decide to rock that day. So yes, definitely look forward to that. Though I love your City Connect Prism Grays, Dan. Guys, friendly reminder, YouTube is the exclusive home for covering our bases moving forward. We're hoping you're tuning in for the extended and uncut versions. Please leave those comments, those likes, those subscriptions. And remember, you can always email us at coveringOurBases@gmail.com to share your feedback, let us know what's working and what's not. And of course, everybody, you can find that at the YouTube channel, Covering Our Bases. Dan, it's been a huge amount of fun as always. Another great 10 games in the history books. We'll see what happens over the course of the next 10 games of the Major League Baseball season as the Midsummer Classic is looming. Arlington is calling. Hopefully not out for more playoff baseball for the Rangers. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will catch you guys next time we take a trip around the bases. Good night, everybody.